Kia ora, g'day, welcome back once again, here with part 3 of my reaction to Mr. Ben Griffin on the HR podcast, hosted by Mr. Hugh Keir. I think, sorry man, if I still haven't worked out if I'm saying your name right, but appreciate you both. If you're here for this, let's jump back in.
And I don't know how much you've done of this yourself in Iraq and that, but basically we were tasked to carry out raids.
We did quite a bit in Afghanistan, for HVTs, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you'd involve, 20, 30 of us, and under the cover of the curfew, sneaking out, usual sort of thing, sneak up, explosives into the houses. And, as a professional soldier in that unit, quite comfortable with carrying out that task. But what became apparent very early on, and was reinforced again and again, was that we weren't actually capturing high-value targets. The names that we were after, the people we were after, were very rarely, if ever, in the locations we were going into. And that didn't seem to make a difference in terms of who we captured. So, say we were after person A, and we carried out a raid on home C, but found person D, who we had no prior knowledge of and we hadn't been looking for, then that we would capture them, take them back. And
was that on? Sorry. I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
In my head, I'm thinking, okay, because I did a bit of stuff as well, and with 3-power, not Professor Ian Gore, fucking 14 or whatever. But I was just thinking, maybe was that all the time? Was that on sort of most of on the occasions where it wasn't the target, but you're in the right house, for example, or right the compound? Would you take them anyway? Yeah,
we'd take everyone every time. Yeah. So basically, any male of military age.
Could it have been because of their association to the house, to the location?
Well, this is where I'm going to try and build up a
okay.
I'll
let you crack on.
Yeah. So if we think about, you start to think then, it's like, oh, why is this happening? Why are we raiding these homes and then not finding the guy we want, or picking up someone, or finding someone else? And then why are we taking them back and handing them over to the Americans? And I started to look at, and you're involved in the bigger process, I suppose, like in terms of prior surveillance of targets. And then we had other guys working in terms of actually gaining the initial intelligence that led to the surveillance and all the rest of it. And you start to think, well, wait a minute, maybe if the initial intelligence isn't correct, is wrong, or is false, think about how many different factions you've got in Iraq at the time, and people get to know that there's a price on intelligence, and if you hand over a name, then you might get $200 or something, and you're in an area of higher unemployment, etc. You're going to start handing names over, and once those names then get handed on to a surveillance team, and the surveillance team's carrying out surveillance of a building that they've been told there's a high value target involved, living there. Everything those people doing there becomes suspicious, because you've already been told by someone you trust, oh, you've got to watch these guys. So like when they put something in the car and drive to another building, that's not, or maybe it's not, what it could be is they're just taking, I don't know, a drill, whatever, round to a mate's house. But obviously your suspicious mind is kind of going, right, what's in the bag, and why are they going to them? And who are they? And why are they digging in the garden? And who's this other fella turning up? And you kind of build up this picture, a pattern of life. But is it if the initial intelligence is wrong or misguided, then what does that do to the surveillance? But there was another aspect to this, and that is that the guys we were taking back were then handed into American custody, and a few of our guys already knew what was happening in that custody. So on a previous tour, guys from my own squadron had seen American soldiers using cattle prods, trying to drown people, using dogs and all the rest of it. And there was an underlying knowledge as well of what was happening in the American detention sites. Like there was one at Baghdad International Airport that there's a public report on, so it's no great secret, but where people were kept in dog kennels and tortured in ISO containers and things like this, which is obviously sort of abhorrent to a British soldier, or it should be anyway. The idea that you'd be playing some sort of part in this, like taking people and then hand them over to be mistreated or tortured, even, like depending on how you define that. So that was really getting to me, this idea that we were taking people who there was no way of knowing if they were innocent or guilty, assuming their guilt, and then handing them over for this sort of like terrible process, really. And, these people would end up I've found out subsequently, these people would end up in detention for an incredible amount of time. So that really started to play on my mind, about taking part in that. Just as an example, one night we got sent out. I think it was in the middle of nowhere. It's like a little hamlet, not sort of on the outskirts of Fallujah or outside of Fallujah, but that sort of area. And the guys had gone into this like isolated place, and there's a young family there. There's a dad and his wife and the two kids. And the story as I remember it, and someone might be able to fill in some of the blanks or whatever. So we've gone in there, and someone started to interrogate, question, and the guy's like, "Look, I don't want any trouble. I've left Fallujah. This is my uncle's farm. I'm trying to get away from this. I just want me and my wife to be left alone." This interrogation happens, and I think there was some paperwork shown, and we had this Iraqi guy with us all the time who was sort of like able to understand the nuance of the, you can learn Arabic, but to really know if someone's telling the truth or not, you need to be from there, don't you? To pick up the little signs. So anyway, our squadron commander got back on the radio and says, "Oh, we're leaving this person here." No, I was on the radio thinking, "Oh, this is great. But what, we're going to leave someone behind? We've decided that this person's got nothing to do with it. We'll leave him behind." And we got back to our house, and I think he got taken next door, or he got taken somewhere anyway, or he got a phone call and got told in no uncertain terms, "We tell you to bring someone in, you bring him in." And the next night, another team went out, I think from the American squadron, picked the same people up. And you're just thinking, what's all this about? We've obviously got no say in this. We're being instructed to detain these people, hand them over for mistreatment, for indefinite detention. And even when we think that the person we're capturing is of no, has got nothing to do with it, that's just like sort of like ignored, and then we'll go back in and do the same thing the next night. I started to think, and there's a lot going on in Iraq and at the time in that sort of like central area. You're seeing stuff going on around you, like the sort of disregard of I am being critical of American troops, but I'm not saying that's because I was in an area where there's a lot of American troops. So that, that's what I saw. But basically it seemed to me that everything that was being carried out, from tiny little operations to raids, was turning the local population against us. Was, if anything, like examples that I've just given, where we'd taken someone in who clearly, or we calculated was not involved in insurgency. We were almost fueling an insurgency, fueling hatred, fueling opposition to us. When you got an American armored unit, I was in doing a liaison job with them, and on the way back from this job, I could hear these knocking noises. It's going bang, bang, bang. I just shouted up to the commander. I said, "What are you doing?" As we're knocking down the lamppost. What do you mean you're knocking down a lamppost? "Oh, you guys, we do this on the way back. It's just for a bit of fun." And at the end of the day, it's lampposts, isn't it? It's not people dying. But then you're just thinking, I think that kind of like showed the sort of disregard for the local people and this kind of like, we can do whatever we like attitude. And you just think, how's this going to work? How's this?
Man, I've intentionally let that run for so long. There's lots in there, eh? Otherwise, I would have been probably stopping at every brief pause. But I'm going to try to recall some of what I've heard and just give my take. One, I'll talk about first. I'll try and work backwards, go back as far as I can from where he is now. Speaking about the lampposts and he's speaking about US troops thumping those over and bowling them over, and they do it for a bit of fun. Yeah, that's really poor. Sort of similar to some of the stuff that I saw during the private security sector, and the warning shots weren't that great of warning shots when you're shooting into the car of a vehicle behind. So yeah, I suppose there is some of that, and I've mentioned it in other videos. There was a concern around, make sure you give a wide berth to American soldiers. You got some young 18, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds manning some fairly heavy weapons, and probably, nervous, rightly or wrongly. They're high IED threat, etc. They're a big target, and you can see them coming a mile away. But yeah, there's that lack of awareness and understanding in terms of you're in a foreign country. You're not going to win any hearts and minds, and sort of linking that together with what Ben has mentioned about their sort of fueling an insurgency. I understand where he's coming from with regards to if you're just taking people because you have to, regardless of whether you've made an assessment or however they've gone about doing that, but they've determined that the person isn't a threat, but they've grabbed them anyway and taken them in. It's that's a tricky one. It's challenging, but you are definitely not going to win any hearts and minds, and if anything, that can cause a bit of an uproar and could definitely work against you if that if that approach continues. The other part is I wasn't there, right? So I wasn't with Ben's team, didn't participate and see that stuff happening. Sounds like they knew a lot of stuff that was going on that wasn't too flash. He mentioned about the camp out by the Baghdad International Airport. I'm assuming he's talking about Camp Victory, which was the camp out there, the main one anyway. There might have been other little smaller camps in and around. I can't remember all the camps that they had in and around Baghdad at the time. But yeah, Camp Victory was the main one out by the Bayat. And yeah, I hadn't heard of anything like that happening out there. And we would go in and out of there fair bits and had some connections and things like that from both military and other contracting providers. But hey, it could have been. And he's mentioned that some of the guys from his unit from 2-2, or that's what it sounds like he's implying anyway, that they were aware of that sort of stuff happening at that particular camp. It may not have been Camp Victory. There may have been another camp, but that's the one that I recall out by the international airport there. Man, but that's, and then the feeling of, well, we've got no say in it. We have to do what we're told in terms of bringing people in. That's a heavy one, man. One thing that I'll share from my observation and experience, when we went into Iraq in 2003, we had the American, I don't know what his role was, but clearly high up, must have been overseeing the whole of the task force at that time. Came and spoke with us, our squadron, before we were getting ready to move to H5, before crossing over into Iraq, and basically let us know that they had no capacity to take prisoners of war, and that it was up to us to determine what it was that we were going to do with, should we get into a contact, and should we have enemy forces surrender to us. It was basically left up to us to decide, obviously our leadership and stuff there. And I've spoken about that, like the ones that we had, we let them go. We didn't take anybody in. We took one for questioning, got what we felt we needed, and then we let them go in the middle of a sandstorm, you know. The other ones, they were left where they were. They had put their weapons down. We didn't go and collect all of their weapons. Right or wrong, we didn't scoop up all the weapons that they had. And we let them go. With genuine thoughts that we're probably going to be fighting these guys again. Now, that's a different context or different scenario, but I give that for context in terms of what was shared to us from an American perspective, and then how we conducted ourselves when we got into contact and we had enemy forces surrender and we let them go. Because we couldn't call US forces if they wanted to come and grab these guys. They were uniformed up, fighting against us. They've surrendered because we've dominated them, regained the initiative, won the firefight, etc., etc. So they've surrendered, but the Americans, nobody's coming to collect these dozen or more enemy combatants that have surrendered to us. So what do? Well, we're not going to murder them, and that's not what happens, so we let them go. So it's a tough situation, but there's a couple of things there, not to try to counter what Ben's experience is. His experience is his experience and what he's seen and what he's witnessed and what he's participated in. I don't know if he's personally seen the torturing and stuff himself that he's talking about. It doesn't sound like he's seen it firsthand. He's talking about, he has mentioned that that was sort of fairly well known, that there was stuff happening potentially in and around that type of thing, but he hasn't come out and said that he's seen it. So yeah, this is a tough one to give, not tough to give a reaction to, but I can understand how tough it is for him when he's talking about the intelligence and the information, and then people, locals, there's a bit of money to be made, so I'll drop this fella's name and that person's name, and I can get some money and potentially make up a story, or it could be true. It's hard. Then you start surveilling those people, watching them, and like he rightly said, everything they do then becomes suspicious. You are not sure, you are wondering, are they a threat? What is that package? What are they doing in the garden? Why are they driving there? Who owns that car, etc., etc. So it's a difficult one, but I don't profess to have all the answers. What I'm doing here is just giving my reaction, my thoughts, and then just sharing, sprinkling in not identical experiences, but some experiences that may be applicable and may be relevant too. There's, I don't want to say bad apples, but there are bad apples in every country, every unit. So even though I've talked about some of the younger US soldiers at the time from a private security perspective, and the cautiousness, the wariness around the US soldiers at that time, that doesn't mean that US Defence Force and US soldiers are bad. Not in my opinion. It's just meant that we needed to be careful. So I don't think Ben's saying that the US forces are bad. He's just spoken about that he was surrounded by, and where he was, there were a lot of US soldiers. And so he's giving his take on what he observed and what he participated in, and the fact that the people that they brought in, that they handed them over to American forces, who then took them and then did whatever it was that they did with them. But this is interesting. So we're going to let this play some more. I've rambled on for quite a long time there, so we'll let this crack on some more.
It's going to work, so we're picking these people up, putting them in detention, we're raiding these houses, causing all this anger, and it really started to get to me, And on a more human level as well, I think, when you're raiding homes, like, I don't know what you were involved in Afghanistan. Maybe they were more like sort of like, I don't know, military compounds or something more akin to that.
No, it varied. It was
varied
homes,
yeah,
did larger compounds, did more or less residential.
Residential, right?
Yeah, but obviously Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
Residential.
So, like when you're going into these homes, and you can see the absolute fear on people's faces, and the kids. Yeah, and you can see in their eyes. I couldn't speak Arabic, and they're looking at you, and they're saying, "What are you doing?" Just on that very human level. Now, put all the rights and wrongs and the tactics and strategies and the intelligence to one side. These kids are looking at you, and they're basically saying, "What are you doing? why are you doing this to us? And I could imagine what it would be like, you know, like to be a kid, 6, you know, and your front door's been blown off with explosives, and then you've got 20 big guys in your house dragging your mum and dad out of bed and holding them at gunpoint, and, you know, maybe slapping your dad around a bit, shouting, you know. And, you know, like one of the jobs I used to do on a regular basis was sort of like ransack the house, you know, like search the house, you know, you're tipping everything upside down, and thinking about it afterwards, you know, you're thinking, well, wait a minute, what did we do tonight? We went into someone's home, terrified them, terrified the kids, took the dad away for indefinite detention, took their passports, their phones, their money, their computers, left a huge hole where their front door, or, you know, in the side of their house or whatever. You think, oh, what we hoping to achieve? What's this achieving, and what we doing, and what are we becoming? You know,
I think, yeah, I suppose what you're looking to do is act on the information that you provided in the first place, which is what they've done, right? So he hasn't said that that's not what they've done. He's given an example of one of many types of situations it sounds like that he's been involved in. Right or wrong, here's the mission set, right? Here's your package, here's the target, here's the location, this is who we suspect is there, this is what we suspect they've done, or this is what we have been told that they've done. So you need to go in and get this person or these people, and you need to bring them in. Be careful, there may be XYZ risks, there may be IEDs, there may be booby traps, they may be armed, they may be this, that and the other. So when you're getting that type of information, so Ben, Mr. Griffin and his team, Tutu, Delta, whoever, when you're getting that type of information about a potential person of interest or HVT that you need to grab and bring them in, that's why you're blowing a hole in the wall or blowing the door off its hinges. That's why you're going in at night after curfew, because there's supposed to be no movement around, because that element of surprise, that speed, aggression, surprise, all of that sort of stuff is in your favor. So that part, I just wanted to try to give some context to that. That's why that type of stuff happens. Now, is that the right approach? When you see the children and you're seeing the female partner and all that sort of stuff in there, well, you don't necessarily know that. They may give information, but then again, you don't know if the younger ones are also, you know, committed to the cause and maybe have been trained in use of weapons. You hope that that's not the case, right? But you just don't know. So you go in hard and you go in fast, and you try to maintain that element of surprise for as long as you can, so that you can get in and get the drop on the people that you're there to grab, to detain, to exfil out of there and hand them on. So obviously he's had a fair bit of time to reflect on it. Well, I don't know how much time he's had to reflect on it, but he's reflected on it and he's gone over those things. And some of these things, it sounds like to me, are haunting him, right or wrong. They're haunting him with regards to what he feels like potentially that they should not have done. And yeah, that hits hard, eh? Like, you got young children, he's speaking about the children there, and they look at you like, what are you doing here? That's, yeah, at the very human level that he's talking about. And I would say just like soldiers, whether they're special forces or not special forces, they've got families for the most part. Most of them have got partners. Some and many have got children, young children, teenage children, and it's no different to the people that you're fighting against, right? So that's my experience anyway. They've got families too. They've got partners, people that care about them, love them. Some have got children that love them and that may not fully understand what it is or what's going on. Some may fully understand what's going on. But that's the nature of when you're trying to crack down on what was happening at the time, the terrorism that was taking place, to try to make a change for good. And that's the difficult part. And this is Ben's experience in and around what he's felt, what he's observed, what he's witnessed. And this is his opportunity, or one of his opportunities, to share, to get this out from his perspective. Man, I'm nobody to say that what he's saying is 100% right or 100% wrong. it's his experience, and he's entitled to share it. It may ruffle a few feathers. It may cause concern for some people, either from a US military or UK government or military perspective. Maybe even some of his teammates, I don't know. But that freedom of speech, and when you've been involved in things that play with your moral compass, for want of a better term, and you feel like you need to let that out, hey, well, we have access to a whole bunch of means to be able to express and share, right or wrong, the things that we feel we need to let out and share. So it's a good conversation. I'm grateful that I have an opportunity to just give my honest reactions to it. There's a lot that I feel like I need to share or just try to give context on. Whether it's balanced, I don't know if it's balanced at all, but it's just my thoughts and opinion anyway. So we'll let this play for a few more minutes, and then I'll look to wrap it up.
You're it's interesting, mate. Interesting you really talk about it. There's very not narrow view. So you're talking about a very specific part of, about as specific as it gets, the lowest level in terms of level of operations. You're talking about a team on the ground raiding. A very specific part on the ground of a bigger picture. And those experiences, are, like you're saying, you experience those with the Americans. My experience is not the go slating them, right? Americans do a good job. I'll try and find a good job somewhere, but I'm sure they've done a good job at one point. I'm joking. But the bigger an organization, okay, this is my belief. Well, it's right. Bigger an organization, the much harder it is to maintain good quality on the baseline. On a baseline level. If you got an organization, a company of 10 people, an organization of 10 people, and 8 of them are office workers, they're flipping ninjas, because you got the boss and the director on them all the time. They're bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It's very hard to keep. It's possible, very difficult to keep good quality on the bottom end and value the customer, military, the civ pop, as much as you would if you were smaller. I think that with the Americans, they don't hold values as high. And I can only speak from the British perspective. I've experienced working with the Americans, I've experienced working with the British as well, obviously. They don't hold their values as high. That's not to say that they don't bother to teach them. It's just that they hold them at a level. We are able to hold the values higher. So, for example, the impact of going and grabbing the wrong flipping person, ransacking a place that doesn't need to be ransacked, even just dropping into a village, just going in to look for high, and this has happened with me in the past. You go into a village to find a high value target, and then you get in, they're not there. Well, even just going into a village, is it impactful negatively? It's the hearts and minds side, right? So I think that the Americans aren't very good at that.
I'm going to pause this here because it's just under 30 minutes, and then we'll come back on another reaction. So I will get through this. You will have noticed that these are being uploaded Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays. I may, if I need to, chuck in 1 or 2 more in a week because of the request that's come through with regards to this one specifically, and the agreement that I have with this channel member with regards to making sure that I deliver on it. So really interesting conversation. Keen to hear where Hugh goes with regards to his take on it. The hearts and minds thing is very interesting. I think it's very difficult. I understand to a degree where Hugh's talking about, because the US machine, the US military beast is so enormous. That's where I think he's talking about when he used that corporate organization, you got 10 employees, 8, it's pretty good, blah, blah, blah. As it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it's harder to maintain high level, good quality at the coalface. So I think that's where he's leading with regards to what he's talking about. But I think it's very difficult for anyone to categorize a whole military unit around not maintaining or upholding their value set as consistently or as highly as in other countries. That's a really big call. Even if you've been fortunate to spend some time with different units, like unless you've lived there for a long period of time, and I don't know what qualifies as a long period of time. I don't know, that you can make that call. Like, I know some Americans, some Brits, Australians, Kiwis, that just have very, very high values, morals, that do a good job at hearts and minds. Some are better than others. I'm not going to get into a debate around who's better at winning hearts and minds. Comes down to on the day and where you are. That's the reality of it. You can't say, I don't think, in my opinion anyway, that you can say, you should send the Americans to do the hearts and minds on that part over there because they'll go down well. Or you should send the Australians there, or the Brits there, or the Canadians there, or the Kiwis there. It's case by case. Each environment's different, and a person's ability to communicate, verbal, non-verbal, their mannerisms, how you conduct yourself, especially a lot of that non-verbal stuff as well, especially when there's a language barrier, plays a huge part in trying to win hearts and minds. That's what you're trying to do, and it's a hard space. So, I don't know if that is what Hugh is about to try to get into, and saying that, a Brits versus American type comparison. Personally, I just think that's too difficult to try to narrow down and say one group or defence force is better than the other at doing hearts and minds, or whatever the case might be, or upholding the values that are taught and that you are trying to display and live by. So anyway, I'll wrap this one up here. Lots to get through, lots to digest. If you made it this far, thank you very much for sticking around. As always, the message is the same. Anybody going through any hard times, difficulties, challenges, just keep turning up, keep putting one foot in front of the other, keep staying in the fight. Know that better days are ahead and the sun will shine again. And there's a light at the end of that long, dark and lonely, miserable tunnel. So stick at it. As always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, there's a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.